I'm Lisa Stone, and you are listening to Season 8 of Parenting Aces.
Welcome to the final episode of Season 8 of the Parenting Aces podcast. We are closing out our 2019 with an interview with Coach Morgan Shepherd, who is based up in the Berkeley area of California. And the way that I got connected with Morgan was actually through the dad of one of the kids that Morgan works with. This dad shot me an email and told me how much he enjoys the podcast, which, I always love hearing that stuff. But he said, I think my son's coach would offer a really unique voice to the shows you've been doing. And I'd love to have you talk to him, hear his approach to junior development, to the mental side and the physical side of the game, and to developing these kids into not only great tennis players, but great people. And so I'm just so happy that Morgan agreed to come on the show. I'm thrilled that we are closing out our year with this interview, and I am just so excited for y'all to hear him. If you have enjoyed the podcast in 2019, please share it with the other tennis parents and tennis friends in your circles. We would love to expand our listenership as much as possible. We'd also love for you to consider becoming a Patreon patron of the show, and the information on all that is in our show notes on ParentingAces.com. So check that out. In the meantime, as the year is coming to a close, as we are entering this crazy holiday season that we go through every year at this time, I want to wish you all a very, very happy holiday season. Wish you all very positive time with those you love. And thank you for being a listener, for supporting Parenting Aces, and for sharing our message with those in your circles. So thank you. And now I bring you Morgan Shepherd. Morgan Shepherd, I am just thrilled to have you on the podcast. Thank you so much for taking time out of your weekend to join us.
Thanks, Lisa. Thanks a lot. I'm really happy to be here.
Well, fantastic. I have been hearing your name for a really long time. I think more because you and my son share a first name, and it's not that common of a name for these days. But I think the Boise connection too, and the Santa Clara connection. I mean, there's so many connections. But the way we wound up doing this podcast together is the dad of one of the juniors that you coach had reached out to me and said, love your podcast, love listening to all these different coaching philosophies. I really think you ought to talk to my kid's coach. He has a unique approach to the sport, and I think it would be great to add his voice to your repertoire. So I'm just really happy that we can do this. And I want to start out by having you give our audience a little bit of your tennis story, how you got started in the sport.
Sure. Yeah. So I grew up in Southern California, and I was predominantly a baseball, football, and basketball player. And I played all of those sports in high school in addition to tennis. And so tennis was like something I did for fun, really. And didn't play that much juniors. Went to like Tony Trabert tennis camp when I was a kid, and had some friends that played and played a few tournaments. But when I started looking at colleges, I was looking primarily for football. And I ran across, I was interested in UC Santa Cruz just because it's a good school and I loved it up there. And I talked to the coach there, who was a man named Bob Hansen, who was the coach there for like 30 years and one of the best coaches I've run across. And he kind of convinced me. He said, look, I was a basketball player in college and actually went to tennis. And I think you can become a great tennis player. And, if you really love tennis, then this is the place to go. And so I decided to play tennis in college, and it took quite a while. I think I was very naive regarding how how complex and coordinated and how much experience it takes to really get good at tennis. And so it took me a couple of years of really hard work with Bob and playing every day for long periods of time to actually get good enough to make that team. And then after that, I ended up being an All-American and getting to the finals of the NCAA's in Division III, and we had a great team that won a national championship my freshman year when I was still trying to, they won their first national championship. Bob's won like 6, I think, at Santa Cruz and another one at Middlebury. And but I was a part of a great culture, and that was maybe the best thing of all.
That's amazing. I mean, do you think that could happen now?
I think it does happen. I don't, Bob Hansen has had a lot of great players that have not been, excellent juniors, but he's helped develop them over time and become really good Division III college players. And I think, I love Division III. I think it's an incredible place to both learn academically some of the best colleges in the country, as well as the culture and the competition at the highest levels of Division III is fierce and great. That being said, tennis is such a high coordination sport that most of the best D1 players and for sure the pro players start at such early ages because of the whatever you want to call it, the motor memory, nervous system memory. Requires such a continuous learning at such usually young ages when the brain and the body are so fresh to create these pathways that I think ultimately give us the best hand-eye coordination to strike the ball.
Mm-hmm. And so what did you major in at UC Santa Cruz? And by the way, if my listeners, if you've never seen the UC Santa Cruz campus, holy cow, that place is amazing. But anyway, yeah.
The tennis courts are on a plateau above the entire Monterey Bay, and it looks out. And so you're playing tennis and seeing the Bay Area. It's a beautiful spot.
And meanwhile, you're in the middle of like a forest and feel like you're at summer camp. I mean, it's the most magnificent thing I've ever seen. Okay. So what'd you major in when you were there?
I majored in psychology, and that's, what I've continued to study throughout. I did, so I probably majored in tennis really. In terms of like the time, it's probably not great for all the kids on the show, but in terms of the time I spent, I probably spent more time focused on, 4 hours a day on tennis and trying to learn everything I could about the game and play it to the best of my abilities. And I loved it. So that's, that's what it was a good reason to do that. And I was, I was really interested in psychology as well, sports psychology and regular psychology too, and trying to understand how how I could integrate that into my own game, but also eventually I became a coach and wanting to really integrate that into the players, to help the players that I was coaching.
Did you always know you wanted to coach?
Yeah, I from an early age, I was coaching. I did, even when I was in high school, I was like coaching at sports camps. And then when I got to college, I started, by the time I was a sophomore in college, I had junior players that I was coaching even then, and that were pretty good. I got lucky. One of the players I coached was like a very good, he started him at like 10 or 11, but he became a very good junior player, maybe like 3 in NorCal during the time that I was coaching college. So yeah, I was always, I loved it. And I loved both the playing and the coaching aspect of it.
And so after you graduated, you went directly into coaching, or was there a detour before you entered the coaching world?
Right. So I when I got out of college, I went and traveled for maybe a year and played. Went to France and Central America and played satellites and tried to get as many matches, experience, points as I could. And then basically ran out of money because anybody that's done that knows how much money it takes to really pursue that dream. And then,
let me interrupt you 1 second. When did playing professionally become a dream for you?
I think I always kind of wanted to be a professional athlete. I loved, all these sports, and it was just what I did. And so then when I was in at Santa Cruz, I was far behind the curve in terms of experience. Like I literally had probably played, coming into Santa Cruz, I probably played maybe 5 tournaments in my life. So that's how little experience I had coming in.
Wow.
Granted, I'd played high school tennis, and but I was a very good athlete, so that was helpful. But I didn't really understand, the hand-eye coordination of the game. You just have to hit so many balls.
Right.
But so then when I was at Santa Cruz, maybe most of the time I was always thinking about I wanted to continue playing. But I always had dreams of trying to play professionally. Yeah.
Okay. It's so interesting to me to hear someone say that, I didn't really focus on tennis. I had all these other sports that I was good at and kind of fell into tennis in college because I met a coach that, really like connected with me. And then you get to the NCAA finals and you're an All-American and you pursue a professional career. That's just not a typical pathway, right?
No, it's not. And I think a large part of that is Bob Hansen, who, like I said, I think he's one of the very best coaches I've ever been around, and just an incredible person. Really and I think this is one of the, probably my main point with coaching philosophy is it's all about the relationship. Mm-hmm. And he's just one of those people you enjoy being around, and that has such a zest for life and passion for the game that you can't help but feel the infectiousness of wanting to do it and be a part of the team and play. And so that was really, that culture really just, I was like, God, this is, I just wanted to play every day, and I wanted to carry it as far as I could. That was coupled with this background of playing all these sports that I'd been competing in every sport since I was 8 years old. And I think that was super helpful once I got the skills of the game, the strokes, and had seen enough balls. Then all of a sudden it started to be all those skills of the speed and the hand-eye coordination, and having competed in a lot of intense situations in football, could be channeled into tennis much better. I still was way behind the curve in terms of like timing and ground strokes, because it just takes so long to get that,
Right. I just think it's such a cool story. And so when you played on tour, you said you played till the money went away. And then what was next after that?
So I was in France playing the money circuits there, and I came back home, and I came back home, and like within 2 days, Bob Hansen had called me, and he's like, "Hey, there's a coaching job open at Pomona-Pitzer College, which is a Division III school, very good academic school, and also a good tennis school." And he said, they're looking for a young coach. I don't know if you're interested. And I said, sure, I'm interested. And so I had been back home for 2 days, and I interviewed maybe 2 days later, and got the job. And so that's how I started my coaching career. Yeah.
I love that. That's amazing. And so you had success there, I'm sure. Made your way to Boise State eventually, which is, I think, how I first heard your name was from Greg Patton. And you are now coaching juniors in a public park situation, right? Up in NorCal.
Yeah. So I live in El Cerrito, which is, overlooking kind of the Bay Area by Berkeley. And I teach on I rent lease the courts from El Cerrito and Albany, which is another community nearby. And I teach about 20 hours a week. I do psychology the other 20 hours or so.
Like you have a practice, like an office practice?
So I work at an agency, and I work with foster youth primarily. And it's not all foster. I work with any type of youth as a clinical therapist.
Okay.
And but primarily foster youth, ranging in ages from 6 to 18. And
Wow. Okay. So I really want to delve into your particular approach to junior development, because I am told that it is something unique. And just talking to you this little bit and hearing your background and the psychology background and what you're doing currently in psychology, I can only imagine what you bring to the practice court with these kids. So what is your kind of underlying philosophy around tennis development with kids?
So, like I said, the very first thing is, I think, is relationship. And that's for both psychology and for tennis, in that so much of who we are is formed in relationship with our parents. And that, so that early, whatever we experience there, we tend to take into, whatever we do, especially whatever we put our hearts, our passion into, right? And so tennis is one of those things that, in the passion, in the competition, in the fire of that, it's about our self is going to show through, right? Both our strengths and our weaknesses and whatever else, right? And so it brings up all those things, which is, if we have places that where we get nervous, or where we get tight, or where we get frustrated or angry or what have you, those are going to show up in these pressure situations on the court. And so much of that, I think, is at some level, we need another person or persons to support us in going through those things that maybe, if we didn't go through them in a way that was supportive or successful, or that fully kind of embraced all of us, all of our feelings, all of who we are when we were younger, then I think often that's what's going to come out on the court. And then that a lot of times becomes the coach's not responsibility, but if you really want to support the player through those parts, which often hold us back, then it is the relationship with the coach that is often going to be the place that the player can develop new ways of dealing with all these challenges and all these parts of ourselves that emerge under pressure, or when we are exploring something passionately.
And so what does that look like specifically when you're in a lesson situation or a drills, group situation with these kids?
All right. So just pick a common theme, say frustration or anger, right? So there, somebody's, we're playing. Maybe we're playing somewhat competitively. Like we're trying to play a point out in the lesson, right? So we're working live ball drill, where we're maybe playing big targets and trying to attack a short ball and come in, right? So, but we're doing it more live rather than me just feeding. Mm-hmm. And so the student knows what they're trying to do, and yet at some point they're missing the short ball. They keep hitting it in the net or long or whatever. It's difficult in the transition game coming forward, and really. So then the drill becomes not, it could be about the technique, or it could be about, the tactics. But in this case, they're getting frustrated and angry. And so they're struggling to keep their focus, and they're not able and their body, their physiology is in a state that it's not conducive to them actually performing the action, the movement well. And so then it becomes more about that, right? The frustration and the anger. So what do we do with that? And that happens often in matches too.
Sure.
And so then for me, from my standpoint, from both the psychology standpoint and the coaching standpoint, the first thing I want to do is kind of get where they're at, to maybe talk to them a little bit, slow them down a little bit, and just ask them what's happening, rather than, if you talk to them a lot, sometimes you already know this, but you may just, there's something about connecting with them so that they get that you understand where they're at, and that you're with them, you're supporting them. It's not so much an antagonistic, like, hey, do it my way, or this is wrong, or something like that. It's like, hey, what's going on with you? And let them actually maybe explain what they're feeling or thinking, either way.
Which can be a challenge in and of itself, especially when you're dealing with younger kids who may not have the self-awareness or even the language to explain to you what's going on with themselves, right? I mean,
absolutely.
To me, that was always, as a parent, even, one of the most difficult challenges when I saw my kids getting worked up, whether it was through sports or academics or just in social settings, and getting them to recognize what was happening and to be able to verbalize it.
Right. And so that's part of that moment is that, I think from my standpoint as the coach and in psychology too, it can be frustrating if they can't verbalize it, right?
Sure.
If they don't know what's happening and you ask them, hey, what's going on? And they're just like, I'm not playing well. I stink, whatever it is that comes out of their mouth. And you're like, okay. Mm-hmm. And so I think part of that is what we as a coach or as a therapist embody in those moments, or as a parent, right? Like, can we remain present, calm, and in a certain way, open to them wherever they're at, right? So that they're going to feel where we're at. And this is one of my primary things, like when I was coaching college tennis, when we would get to coach the players on the court. And a lot of times I felt it was more about the coach's presence than it was necessarily what they were telling, what we told the players tactically, that if the coach can embody, okay, hey, I'm confident, I'm present, I'm enjoying this, I'm with you, then the player got that, right? And they felt it, and they could then take it onto the court. But if I'm, as a coach or a parent or whoever, embodying this, like, what are you doing? Why can't you be calm on the court? Why aren't you, executing what I'm telling you to do? If it's from that standpoint, then you get into this kind of reciprocal relationship where both people are kind of charged and pushing that, essentially the nervous system, to a dysregulated level. And that's when you're not going to have a lot of great play from there. And you're probably not going to relate, be able to talk relationally in a good way from there either. So anyway, I don't know. Is that making sense?
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, I'm listening to this and I'm thinking, it makes total sense to me that if the adult is also in an agitated state, that things spiral downward very quickly. So as adults, it's our responsibility to kind of quash, even if we are feeling agitated or are feeling angry and upset with our kid for behaving poorly or, not playing fully engaged or whatever it is. It's only going to make matters worse if we're not able to stay calm ourselves. And that, when my kid was playing and I was on the sidelines, that was the biggest challenge I faced week in and week out. And I can tell you, when he finally got to college, that was the time where I was finally able, as the person on the sideline, the adult, to say, you know what, this is just a tennis match and I get to sit here and watch my kid do this thing. And how lucky am I? But it took me, it took me a really long time to get there. And if we're not there, how in the heck can we expect our kids to get there?
Yeah. And this is generally how they learn it, right? If the parent knows how to, there's two parts to this. One is parent knowing how to stay calm and really see the child and attune to where the child is at. This doesn't mean that like we let them do these acts of like, you know, whatever, breaking a racket or cheating or whatever it is that is, you know, that we really need to hold those boundaries, because that's not gonna serve anybody, much less the child or the, you know, anybody else if that's happening. But it does mean that we can hold our presence in a way that doesn't kind of go along with that same energy that the child's, you know, producing at that point, or the student or whoever it is. Mm-hmm. So that's the first part. And that's a lot of psychology is in some ways about learning how to be with our feelings, right? Learning how to be like, oh, there's frustration, there's anger. This is comfortable, right? I either want to explode or I want to go away or I want to quit. Okay, can I actually be in that feeling? Can I actually like acknowledge this is what is right now in my body at some level, and oh, there's my thoughts that go along with that, and be with it. Because we can't be with it, then at some level it just runs the show. It takes us, you know, in either an action that we may not want to do, or kind of just suppressing it to the point where we're just going to be so tight that we can't really play.
But Morgan, specifically, when you're on the court with a kid and you see them start to go to that place of anger, frustration, you know, self-doubt, whatever it is, what in the moment are you doing as the coach, or are you saying as the coach to teach them the skill of being with the feeling and, you know, letting it do its thing without, you know, causing the match to go down the toilet?
Right. So the first thing is the presence. Whatever you're embodying is going to really help the other person either find that calm or be able to actually feel the anger and hold it rather than pushing it away, right? So if you personally don't know how to feel anger and hold it, like, and be with it, then it's very hard to teach that skill to somebody else. Okay, so that's the first part is, and people sense that when like, oh, this person can be with me in this emotion, or they're not comfortable with it, so they can't be with me. So that's the first part. The second part is that, you know, so when you're talking to them about verbalizing it, right, you may support them in like, hey, you know, verbalize it, like you're frustrated right now, you're angry, and you know, and I like it, you know, but then I would probably connect them to like, okay, what do you want? Because at the heart of anger or frustration, usually something you want that you're not getting, right? So we're going to.
Okay, wait, sorry, you broke up for a second there. So you said in the heart of anger, in the heart of frustration, usually they want what?
There's something that they want that they're not getting.
Okay, got it.
Anger is generally about taking some action. Like it's calling for something to happen that's not happening, right? We want, in this case, you know, back to the example on the court, like, okay, it says that this person is trying to, you know, create a short ball, get the short ball, attack, and come in and finish the point, right? And they keep hitting it in the net or long or whatever it is. And so they're not being able to execute the goal of hitting the ball well to where they want it to go, you know, and hopefully win the point, right? Like a lot of times it gets stuck in that. Well, I want to win and I'm losing, so I'm getting frustrated. But we need to dwell down closer to the actuality in the present moment of what's happening, because you don't win by wanting to win. You win by executing, the skill. And so you have to know what you're trying to do in order to do it, right? So
Sure.
in this case, it might be, so first I'm going toward like, okay, let's get their anger focused on what is it you really want? Okay, I want to hit the ball well. I feel like I'm playing poorly. Great. Okay. Can we channel that? Your anger is okay because in a certain way, it's calling for something good. You want to play well, right? You want to win. You want to execute. Great. That's a good thing. It's not a bad thing. So by identifying it to something that is actually at the core of what they want, rather than just like, I want to smash the racket, then you can start channeling it. Okay. So does that make sense again?
Yeah.
Okay. So then it can be a longer term process of bringing them to the present moment of, okay, what are the things that allow you to play well? And that, the number one thing, I mean, this is very simple, but is that we need in competition, we need to be able to track the ball well. That is like the number one skill is how well do we track the ball? And that's also what keeps us present because the ball, if we're really engaged with it, it absorbs our attention almost completely if we're tracking it well, and that in and of itself keeps us present in the moment. So then these other things of thoughts of like, oh, I'm not playing well, or I need to do this, or what happens if I lose, generally can fade away. It's almost like a meditation in that sense.
Okay. And so how do you get them back to that place?
I think number one is first of all, that they're seen and heard and you're with them, right? So that helps bring the level of their anger, their frustration down at some level, or at least contain it because they're sharing it with another person, which is helpful. Two, we identify what they really want. Okay, you want to play well, you want to win. Okay, how do we do that? And then the process of this generally takes time of like, okay, let's come back to the present moment. Like, let's get back to tracking the ball. Or, it could be another cue. There's other cues that like, if it's something technically that's not working for them, let's channel it. Let's get you doing what your footwork pattern or, your swing the right way. We might have to slow this down and back it out and do something else to get you to the point where your skills are at a level that you can accomplish what you're wanting to accomplish in the drill. And so that's, that becomes the coach and the player figuring out what the best focus is in that moment that can keep them really present and have them feel confident and successful at what they're doing.
I mean, as you're saying all this, of course, it makes 100% sense. Right. But what's jumping out at me is one, the fact that you during a practice session are incorporating practicing the mental side of the game that they're going to need to get stronger at if they're going to be successful in competition. Two, you are giving them skills that they are going to be able to use in so many different settings, not just in a tennis setting. And three, the fact that I have watched enough tennis lessons and group lessons and drills, over the last however many years to realize that in the majority of cases, if a kid has a meltdown on the court during practice, most of the coaches are just disciplining the kid and telling him to knock it off and get back to the job at hand, rather than using this as an opportunity to practice a skill that's going to make them a better competitor. And I mean, am I saying something that makes sense to you? I just, as I'm listening, I'm thinking, holy cow. I mean, this is so awesome that you're using the practice time to develop such an important life skill for them.
Yeah. And I think this is the opportunity that tennis and sports and coaching present so much of the time, is that we're teaching these deeper life skills, right? The relational, the how do you stay with something that's important to you, How do you focus in the right way to get what you really want? These are such important skills. That being said, your example of like most of the time coaches, are just disciplining. I think it's really important to recognize that we need to kind of set this up, these situations up. Like it's going to take some time to talk about it, especially when it's first happening, right? Mm-hmm. Like when the frustration or the anger first comes, that you may need to spend some time with that person to tell them about what your philosophy on that is, or how you handle that, or what the expectations are for that person when this comes up. And so that over time, as they understand what you're asking for in these situations and how to focus their essentially, I think of like frustration and anger as energy inside of us, how to focus that energy, then it becomes a much faster process when we're in the lesson or in the competition, hopefully, where you can just, remind them, hey, what's really important? What, one of the common acronyms is what's important now, right? When, what is important now that in order for me to get what I want, right? And because if we tank or we quit or we smash the racket or whatever it is, we're not generally going to get what we want. And it's just going to feel worse, or we're going to feel dejected down the road, right? So that's where this process, once they kind of understand the process and that we, and feel our support, that's why relationship is so key, is they need to really feel us with them in a way that we're helping them in the beginning contain the emotion, be with the emotion, and then we're going to help them channel it. But that takes time, and that's not, that it's not something that we can just immediately like stop in the middle of a lesson and be like, okay, we're going to do this. We could do it that way, and I do it that way, but it like is going to require like, hey, we're going to take 10 minutes to really get clear on what we're doing here. And then over time, it can be, let's just take a minute and figure out how to refocus and get you going in the right direction.
Mm-hmm. And is this something that you discuss with families when they first show up at your facility and, want you to work with their child? I mean, are you discussing with them from the get-go that, hey, this is my philosophy, this is my approach on coaching and tennis, and I just want you to understand that you may show up at a lesson and you may see us standing there talking, and that doesn't mean that we're not working. We are working. This is part of the process.
Yeah.
Because let's face it, parents, when parents pay for a lesson, a lot of the time the expectation is that you're going to hit as many balls as possible during that hour, whatever the time period is, right?
Right.
And they're not happy if they show up and balls aren't being hit.
Right. I don't generally discuss it with people in the beginning. I teach, like I think many pros teach in the setting I'm in, where you have an hour and I want to get the most out of that hour. And so, the person shows up for their first lesson. Usually they've heard, almost all my advertising is through word of mouth.
Okay.
So I have the benefit of usually somebody that has played a lot of tennis telling another person that's played a lot of tennis, hey, you might want to go try this guy as a coach. So I have that already there a lot of the time. Then, so when we start, I'll always ask them, for their first time, and I usually ask them in the beginning of lessons too, what do you want to get out of this, or what are your goals, or something like that. And I'll get some information from the parent, usually on the phone, like how did they start playing, a little bit of what they're after, and maybe what the challenges are. Mm-hmm. So I have some of that in mind, but not always. And then we just start, we play, because at the heart of the game, and this is a whole nother side of it. There's so much to this, all this stuff, but one of the main things about regulating the nervous system and creating the right physiology for performance is that we want to build on the good. We want to build on what somebody's doing well, that we learn the most actually from when we're hitting the ball well and then dwelling on that and letting that become stronger and more, rather than focusing on what somebody's doing wrong, or what is, they have a problem with their stroke mechanic. Let's focus. I'm incredibly, I believe that the highest level of players, if you look at Federer or Djokovic or Nadal, they are the best ball strikers. They have the best technique. They are the best. They are the best form. So we want to get our players to the highest level of form, because they'll have more skills to play better, to hit the ball better. And that is essentially what tennis, one of the main things that tennis is about. So I'm always focused on that. And I think a lot of times people try to get there through telling people what they're doing wrong. And I think, from my perspective, I want to get you there by feeling what you're doing right, and then continually moving that in the direction of the highest level of form of the stroke or of the technique. And so, because essentially, if the body and the mind, which I think are, kind of one, they're not really two separate things, are in the right physiological state, that our nervous system, our sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous system are balanced, then we are feeling good. We are in the best place to perform well and learn well. So most of what I'm doing is trying to get that student or whoever's taking the lesson into a good physiological state, both physically but also mentally, and go from there. And so if something comes off, then we have to figure out how to get it back on. But that is more of a focus than anything else.
So if a student comes to you and says, I'm really not happy with my backhand slice. I need to work on it. It needs to get better. I need this in my repertoire. So I'm assuming you're going to feed them some balls and watch how they hit the ball with the backhand slice. And then what's your approach? You're not, what I'm hearing from you is you're not going to look at that slice and say, your grip's all wrong. We got to fix that. Instead, it sounds to me as if your approach would be, wow, I really like how you keep your elbow up to start the backhand slice. And so let's build on that. And from there, the next piece of your swing pattern should be blah, blah, blah. I'm not a coach, so I don't know all the technical
No,
stuff.
you're saying it well. Yeah.
So is that how you, is that how you would talk to a kid that comes to you with that? Like, hey, I need you to help me fix my backhand slice?
Yes. I rarely am I going to point out what's wrong. I may come to that at some point, but yeah, I'm still going to work on their technique. So it could be similar to what you're saying. Yeah, you find what they're doing well, and yes, that's it. But what I do find a lot of times is that when there is a mechanical problem, that the body is tight somewhere, and it's generally in a joint. It can be a muscular tightness, but a lot of times it's in a joint. And so then the joint is not mobilizing the way it needs to mobilize to hit the ball at its best. And so part of what I'm doing is trying to figure out how to let that joint or the tension pattern become free. And then I'm going to try to put them in a situation where, because at the highest level of the game, the body the highest form technically is the most natural, is the most natural way to strike the ball. So that being said, the body wants to move towards its nature. It wants to swing in the most efficient way possible, which is also the most efficient way, energy-wise, is also going to lead to the most powerful way, and also generally the most controlled, right? So we're just trying to let the body take its natural form. And so we don't have to necessarily point out what's wrong to let the body move towards what's right.
And if you're saying in a lot of cases it's a joint issue rather than something else happening, what are you doing specifically to free up that mobility in that joint? Or, I mean, are you doing like warm-up exercises, bands, something like that, or is it something else?
I mean, I think the warm-up and things are really key in that like I do a dynamic warm-up, and I don't usually use anything else, but I generally try to get the body loose, at ease, in a good rhythm, feeling comfortable, having fun, playful. That sets the tone for everything to be working pretty naturally, right? But a lot of times, if there's a habitual pattern, that doesn't change the pattern. So then I will bring awareness to the joint, meaning like, so in your example of, say the person slices off, right? And they're either their elbow is tight or their shoulder, one of those two joints. So the form of it isn't like, the arm isn't, we talk about like the kinetic chain, right? And, kind of from the ground up through the body and coming through. And the last part of that kinetic chain is the hand and into the racket. So each of these joints is kind of like a doorway of that kinetic chain in a certain way. So if the elbow's tight or the shoulder's tight, then we're not going to have that flow into the ball, and probably not going to have the feel for the ball on the strings that we really want either. So then I'm asking the person to maybe put a little bit of awareness into their elbow. I'm not telling them they're doing anything wrong. I'm just saying, hey, can you notice what your elbow is doing as you swing the racket, right? And so then just in that awareness, they may find that, oh yeah, I feel, it feels a little tight or whatever it is. I'm just listening to what they'll say about it, right? And just, oh, that's interesting. And then I'm feeding them. I'm really also navigating my feeds, right? Because another one of the main principles that if I'm feeding the ball at too fast or the distance is too far away, then what's happening is they're going to revert to their pattern, their habitual muscle memory. We call it muscle memory, but it's really nervous system memory, I think. They're going to revert to the pattern that they've been using and that they know best. And so that tightness is part of that pattern. And so then they just are going to keep going with that tightness. So I need to, I'll go to a hand feed much closer in. I'll go maybe to the point where I don't even feed and just have them shadow the stroke so that they can feel, what it's like to swing at ease. Mm-hmm. And then slowly feed them balls so that hopefully that joint or muscle pattern releases. Also being said, I will have them mobilize the joint in different ways, move the joint up, down, left, right, turn it in certain ways so that they can feel what the range of motion is like and what it's like for it to be free. And then start to hit from that, once they free it up, then start to hit from that perspective or get feeds from that place.
This is all just so interesting to me. Honestly, I have never talked to a coach about these kinds of details. And I've talked to a lot of coaches over the last 8 years. I'm fascinated by how you combine the psychology piece with the physical piece, with the competition and the development, and all of these things kind of come together. And I guess this is why Scott wanted me to talk to you. So Scott, if you're listening to this, thank you. One of the other things that Scott mentioned when he first reached out to me to introduce the two of us was your worldview and, your approach to life in general and how you share that with your students. And so I wanted, because we're coming down the last 10 minutes or so, I wanted to give you an opportunity to talk about that a little bit.
Sure. When you say my worldview, can you give me a little bit more like what you're thinking of in relation to that?
Yeah, I mean, listen, it came to me in an email, so I'm assuming what Scott means is kind of your philosophy on human development as opposed to just tennis player development, and the lessons that you try to impart to these kids in hopes of having them develop into good human beings.
Yeah. I definitely see tennis as a microcosm of life that is something that it's a practice, something that we get to, as coaches and as players, we get to focus on that. And if we love it and are passionate about it, it is going to show us, tell us, give us a chance to see ourselves. And so that opportunity, both as the coach and as the player, in relationship to, because I think at the same, like, I'm learning as much a lot of times I feel like from the player as they're learning from me. So I think I take that mentality into it, that I have a lot to offer this person, but I also have a lot to like, it's a reciprocal relationship. And in that, we're going to explore this microcosm tennis, and that exploration is really about the development of ourselves, in this, in the game, in relation to the game, but in our relationship as well. I see it that way, that the skills, that what they learn in terms of, the emotional side of the game that we were talking about, what they learn in terms of how their body is, how to become more natural in the way that they move, so that they can take that into their lives, so that hopefully they're healthier as they move through their life and get older and do other things, and don't have these chronic injuries that can plague us. That they learn that if I give myself to something and I'm willing to really be authentic, that I can share, like tennis and sports, like what I think one of the things we love about it is that I think at the highest levels, it takes all of us. We have to be willing, not have to be, we if we are willing to show all of ourselves in these moments, that, all of the emotions of the spirit, the focus, the ferocity, as well as the kind of the openness and the intimacy that goes with really being on a stage in front of people and competing at, giving our best, that in and of itself is just a wonderful lesson that, hey, in order to do something really well, it's these qualities, opening ourselves up and being ourselves, that ultimately give us the highest level of performance and at the highest level of satisfaction. And so I think that's really what I'm about for, as a coach, that these things line up, that there's a reason that, I think we love it, but also that it's like the more that we give to the game, the more it calls us to give fully of ourselves to, in the performance, really.
I love that. Thank you for sharing that. And thank you for taking time to chat with us and to introduce yourselves to the Parenting Aces community, yourself to the Parenting Aces community, and your approach to coaching and your approach to tennis and your passion for this sport, which just oozes out of you as I'm on the phone with you here. I'm just, I hope we have an opportunity to meet in person sometime really soon. So thank you, Morgan Shepherd. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Lisa. No, it's a joy to get to share it, and it seems like I'm really happy that you're doing what you do. It seems like a really, really needed and just something that people can get a lot out of. So thanks for having me.
Well, thanks for being on. And to my audience, thank you so much for tuning in. We will catch you next time, which will be in 2020, season 9 on Parenting Aces. Have a great day, y'all.
I'm Lisa Stone, and you've been listening to the Parenting Aces podcast. For tennis parents, by a tennis parent. If you like what you've heard, I hope you'll share the podcast with your tennis community. For all the information you need to navigate the junior and college tennis journey, be sure to check out ParentingAces.com.